There's a strange kind of peace that comes with hiking in thick fog. The world shrinks to a small, intimate circle around you, and everything else is a silent, white void. That's what I told myself, anyway, on a solo hike in a remote state forest, known for its deep, silent trails. I was about 5 miles in when I saw it, nailed to the trunk of an ancient oak tree, a small, hand-painted wooden sign. It was crudely made, the letters painted in a shaky black hand, but the message was starkly clear: don't look. My first thought was that it was a hiker's joke, a strange piece of trail art, or a reference to some local legend I hadn't heard. I laughed, a nervous, quiet sound that was swallowed by the silence of the fog. I took a photo of it with my phone, thinking it would make a good story later, and continued on my way. The feeling of quiet solitude now replaced by a small, prickly sense of unease. The fog grew thicker, reducing visibility to a mere 10 feet. The trail, once a clear path of packed dirt, was now a vague suggestion of where I was supposed to go. I started to hear sounds that shouldn't have been there. Faint, breathy whispers seemed to be carried on the humid air, coming from the trees themselves, just at the edge of the visible world. They were too quiet to make out, just a low, constant murmur that felt like a chorus of secrets. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind through the leaves, a common auditory illusion in a dense forest. But the wind was still. Then I started seeing things in the fog, fleeting movements at the periphery of my Vishuna, tall, thin, shadow that moved with a jerky, unnatural motion, a blur of motion that disappeared when I looked directly at it. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a side effect of the isolation. But then I found a second sign. This one was nailed to a thick branch, almost hidden from view. It was the same crude wood and shaky letters. This one said, "Don't stop." The whispers grew louder, and they started to make out words. The words were my name. They were my name, whispered over and over again, in a multitude of voices, some high and childlike, some low and guttural. The whispers were no longer coming from the trees. They were coming from the fog, and they were all around me. My casual hike had become a terrifying journey, a race against an unknown presence. The signs were no longer a joke. They were rules. A cold dread settled in my bones as I pushed myself to walk faster, to get out of the forest, to get away from the whispers and the shadows and the signs that were now scattered everywhere. Don't listen, don't breathe. Each new sign was a new rule, a new command that was meant to be followed. I ran blindly through the fog, pushing past branches and stumbling over roots. The whispers now a deafening chorus of my name. I felt like I was being herded, like I was following a path that had been meticulously laid out for me. My frantic flight led me to a small clearing, a strange, unnatural patch of ground where the fog seemed to have retreated. The clearing was bathed in a pale, ethereal light, the air still and silent, a terrifying contrast to the chaos I had just run from. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, impossibly old tree, its trunk thicker than a car, and on the trunk, at eye level, was the last sign. It was the same crude wood, the same shaky letters. It simply said, "Now." The whispers, which had been a chorus of voices, suddenly fell silent. The air was heavy with a profound and terrible quiet. The only sound was the thumping of my heart in my ears. I stood there, frozen with terror, my eyes fixed on the sign, my mind screaming at me to run, but my body refusing to move. I thought about the first sign. Don't look. It was a command, a rule, a warning, and I had ignored it. A sickening curiosity, a terrifying, irresistible urge to see what was behind the curtain, took hold of me. I raised my head, my eyes moving, slowly from the sign, up the trunk of the massive tree, to see what was above it, and that's when I saw them. Wrapped around the back of the trunk, just above the sign, were two long, impossibly pale, multi-jointed fingers, their skin thin and wrinkled, their tips ending in sharp, black talons. The fingers were wrapped around the trunk, holding the sign in place, and as I watched, they slowly began to curl, their grip on the tree tightening, the sound of the wood creaking a low, horrible groan in the silent clearing. I don't remember what happened after that. I just remember running blindly through the fog, the whispers gone, the only sound, the pounding of my feet on the forest floor. I stumbled onto a main road hours later, a total wreck, my clothes torn, my body covered in scrapes and bruises. I tried to tell the police what I had seen, but they found no signs, no clearing, no massive tree. They wrote it off as a delusion brought on by panic. I never went back to that forest. I don't go hiking anymore. I can't shake the image of those fingers and the horrifying, terrifying thought that the signs weren't meant to protect me. They were a set of rules, and I had broken the most important one. The last sign wasn't a joke. It was the end of the game, and I had looked at the thing that was holding the sign, and I know, with a chilling certainty, that it saw me. There are 3 of us, me, my best friend Marc, and his girlfriend, Jessica. We'd been planning this trip for months. A weekend of hiking and camping in a remote part of a national forest that was far enough from the main trails to feel truly wild. We had chosen a beautiful spot, a small clearing next to a winding creek, surrounded by towering pines. The first hour was a perfect montage of pitching tents, starting a fire, and cracking jokes. We were deep in the forest, miles from the nearest road, a feeling that usually brings a sense of freedom. But that feeling was shattered by a sound that came from the darkness beyond the firelight. It was a cry, a faint, distorted voice, calling for help. It was a high, terrified sound that was stretched and warped by the distance, but the message was clear. We all froze, our casual conversation dying in our throats. Marc, ever the pragmatist, shook his head. Probably another group of campers messing around. Jessica shivered. It sounded like a kid. The sound came again, a little closer this time, and we all knew it wasn't a joke. It was a horrifying, inhuman sound, a sound of a person in profound pain, and it was coming from the woods. We sat by the fire, our conversation now a quiet, tense murmur, our ears straining to hear the sound again. Our phones, we soon discovered, had no signal, a fact that had seemed like a good thing just an hour ago, but now felt like a prison. The cry for help came again, but this time, it was different. It sounded like Marc's voice, a terrified plea for help, coming from the darkness beyond the edge of our camp. Marc's face went white. "That's not me," he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Jessica started to cry. The voice came again, this time sounding like my father, his voice raw with panic, calling my name. I felt my blood run cold. It was impossible. He was at home, 100 miles away. The voice was a perfect imitation, but it was coming from the darkness, and it was a lie. The whispers and cries continued, a chorus of voices, all of them familiar, all of them begging for our help, begging for us to come out into the darkness and find them. We started to argue, our fear turning us against each other. Marc thought it was a prank, a group of sadistic campers who were trying to scare us. Jessica thought it was something else, something supernatural, something evil. I just sat there, listening, a cold dread settling over me. I saw fleeting shadows at the edge of the firelight, tall, thin silhouettes that disappeared when I looked directly at them. The cries for help were now a constant presence, coming from all directions, a terrifying symphony of familiar voices. We were completely isolated, and something out there knew who we were. It knew our fears. It knew our loved ones. It was a lure, a trap set with our own memories, and we were falling for it. The cries for help reached a fever pitch. a deafening chorus of our loved ones begging for us to come out. We were huddled in the center of our camp, our bodies pressed together, our eyes fixed on the darkness. I thought about the car, miles away. I thought about the nearest trail, a vague suggestion in the darkness. We were alone, and whatever was out there, it wasn't going away. The cries for help suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. It was a silence that meant the game was over. The lullaby had been sung, and the thing that was listening was now here. We heard a low, guttural growl, a wet, horrifying sound that came from the darkness just outside our tents. It was the sound of something hungry, something that was no longer pretending to be a voice from the past. A heavy thud hit the side of my tent, a violent, sickening impact that made the fabric groan. The growling intensified, a low, constant rumble that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. And then, we heard the sound of the tent flap. The zipper was slowly, deliberately, being unzipped from the outside. Jessica started to scream, a high, panicked sound that was swallowed by the growling. The zipper reached the end, and the flap was slowly pushed open. In the small, flickering light of the fire, we saw them, a pair of impossibly long, thin, pale hands, their fingers spindly and multi-jointed, reached inside. The hands were beckoning us, their long fingers slowly curling, a silent command for us to come out. The growling turned into a wet, clicking sound as if the thing was licking its lips, anticipating a meal. We didn't wait to see the rest of it. We ran blindly through the woods, our terrifying screams a testament to the horror we had just witnessed. We ran for hours, our bodies covered in scratches and bruises, our lungs burning, until we stumbled onto a main road, a total wreck. A passing car saw our terrified state and called for help. We were all treated for shock, but the doctors found nothing physically wrong with us. But the mental scars were deep and lasting. We never went back to that part of the forest. The image of those hands, their long, pale fingers beckoning us, is burned into our memories. The sound of that wet, clicking growl haunts our nightmares. The worst part, though, is the question that haunts us, a constant, nagging doubt that we can't escape. Was it really a cry for help we heard? Or was it a lure, a trap set by something that knew our deepest fears and our most precious memories? And were those hands reaching in to save us or to claim us? We'll never know. The forest in the autumn is a symphony of color and light. As a passionate amateur photographer, it's my favorite time to be in the woods. I was on a solo trip to a dense, secluded forest, miles from the nearest road, a place known for its vibrant foliage. The air was crisp and cool. The leaves were a fiery tapestry of reds and yellows, and the sun filtered through the canopy in a way that made the entire world feel like a painting. I found a perfect subject, an old, gnarled oak tree with twisted branches, its leaves a magnificent, deep crimson. I framed the shot, the composition perfect, and snapped the picture. I checked the photo on my camera's display, and that's when I saw it. Standing in the deep background, half hidden by a thicket of brush, was a figure, a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in old, tattered clothes. But what was most unsettling was his pose. He was standing perfectly still, his arms rigid at his sides, his body unnaturally straight, like a mannequin. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I quickly dismissed it. He was probably a fellow hiker I hadn't noticed. It was a strange pose, but people are weird. I deleted the photo, not wanting a stranger in my shot, and continued on my way. The peaceful solitude now tainted by the memory of that strange, unmoving figure. I continued to photograph, my mind trying to shake off the image of the man. I found a small stream, It surfaced a perfect mirror for the colorful trees overhead. I set up the shot, took a picture, and checked my camera. And there he was again, the figure, standing in the background, on the other side of the stream, his body rigid and still, a tall, gaunt silhouette against the vibrant foliage. This time he was farther away, but I knew it was the same man, the same unnaturally stiff pose. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I took another picture, just of the sky, but he was there, a distant figure in the corner of the frame. He was moving, I realized, but not like a person. He was moving with a silent, terrifying speed, always just outside my direct line of sight, appearing and disappearing in the background of my photos. I started to hear a sound that was not natural to the forest, a faint, dry whisper, like a dead leaf scraping against a tree trunk, a low, constant presence that seemed to be getting closer. My peaceful trip had become a terrifying game of cat and mouse, a race against a stalker who was everywhere at once. I started seeing him with my own eyes now, a tall, gaunt man in old, tattered clothes, his body rigid and unmoving, staring directly at me from a distance, just at the edge of my visible world. His face was a blank, hollow mask. The dry, scraping whisper was now a constant, chilling presence, and I realized that it was coming from the man himself, a sound of rustling skin and dry, rattling bones. The woods were no longer a beautiful place. They were a hunting ground, and I was the prey. My heart was pounding in my chest as I raced back to my car. The sound of the dry, scraping whisper, a constant presence behind me. I could feel his gaze on my back, a physical weight that made me stumble and fall. I finally made it to my car, a small, gray sedan, and fumbled for my keys. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely get them out of my pocket. The figure was standing there, a few feet away from my car, just behind the driver's side. Door perfectly still, his body rigid, his blank, hollow face staring at me. I could see the tattered clothes, the gaunt and possibly thin body, the dry, leathery skin. I was so close to him, so close to the thing that had been stalking me, that I could smell him. It was a smell of old, dead leaves and dry, turned earth, a smell of decay and death. My mind was screaming at me to get in the car, to lock the door, to drive away, but I was frozen with a profound and terrible fear. I heard a voice. It wasn't a whisper. It was a dry, scraping, rattling voice, a sound of bones and leaves, and it came from right next to my ear. "Thank you for the pictures," it said. My breath caught in my throat. I turned my head, slowly, my eyes wide with terror, but there was nothing there, just the air. But I felt something cold and hard and skeletal, traced the outline of my jaw, a single, long finger brushing against my skin. A terrible, final touch. I don't remember getting in the car. I don't remember driving away. I just remember the feel of that cold, skeletal finger on my face, and the sound of that dry, rattling voice in my ear. I drove 4 hours, not stopping until I was back in the city, surrounded by the noise and lights of civilization. The first thing I did was check my camera. The memory card was wiped clean. Every single photo I had taken was gone, but the memory of the figure and the feel of that cold, dead touch is burned into my mind forever. I still see him sometimes, in the periphery of my vision, a tall, gaunt figure, standing perfectly still, his body rigid, his blank, hollow face staring at me, and I still hear that dry, scraping whisper, and I know, with a horrifying certainty, that whatever was in that forest, it was not just a man. It was a thing that was waiting to be seen, and it wanted me to know that it had seen me, too.